The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber burst open with a thunderous crash. Ambassador Veltar, his dragon-like scales gleaming under the artificial lights, stormed into the hall, with fury burning in his golden eyes. Every step he took echoed through the vast space, making the crystal floors tremble beneath his clawed feet. Representatives from across the galaxy turned to watch as the Draconian leader marched toward the central podium. His breathing was heavy, steam rising from his nostrils like an angry beast. The normally composed ambassador looked completely different today, wild, desperate, and filled with rage that threatened to explode at any moment. 300 ships! Veltar's voice boomed across the chamber as he slammed his massive fist down on the crystalline podium. The impact sent cracks spreading through the ancient structure like spider webs. 300 of our most advanced warships have simply vanished into thin air. The hall fell silent. You could hear a pin drop as thousands of alien beings processed what they had just heard. The Draconian 10th Fleet was legendary throughout the galaxy. These weren't just any ordinary ships. They were the most feared vessels in known space. Equipped with weapons that could crack planets in half and shields that could withstand the heat of dying stars. Veltar's voice cracked with emotion as he continued. 50,000 warriors. 50,000 of our bravest souls, our finest soldiers, our most experienced commanders gone. Not dead in glorious battle, not destroyed by enemy fire, but simply gone. No final transmission, no distress call, no explosion, no debris field. Nothing. Council Speaker Thanaris, a tall being with silver skin and multiple arms, raised one hand to call for order. But the whispers had already started. Representatives from the 7 major galactic civilizations leaned toward each other, their conversations, creating a buzz that filled the enormous space. "How is this possible?" whispered the Alterian delegate, her blue skin turning pale with worry. "The humans are barely spaceworthy," muttered a Kelleran officer, his tentacles twitching nervously. "They just figured out how to send messages faster than light speed last year." "Maybe it's some kind of natural phenomenon," suggested another voice from the crowd. But Veltar wasn't having any of it. His eyes swept across the assembly like searchlights, looking for any sign of deception or hidden knowledge. "Don't you dare suggest this was an accident. Our fleet disappeared near that backwater mudball called Earth. Those primitive humans must have done something." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Earth's inhabitants had only recently made contact with galactic civilization. Their technology was so basic that most species considered them barely above Stone Age level. They flew around in chemical-powered rockets like ancient relics, used radio waves for communication, like children playing with toys, and their most powerful weapons were nuclear bombs that wouldn't even scratch the paint on a Draconian shuttle. Yet, somehow impossibly, an entire fleet of the galaxy's most advanced warships had vanished in their solar system. "The humans will provide answers," Veltar declared, his voice growing more dangerous with each word. "They will explain how our ships disappeared, where our warriors have gone, and they will return them immediately. Or we will tear their pathetic little world apart piece by piece until we find what remains of our people." The chamber erupted in voices as delegates argued among themselves. Some called for immediate military action, others urged caution, and a few suggested diplomatic solutions, but underneath all the debate was a growing sense of unease. Speaker Thanaris finally restored order by activating the chamber's sound-dampening field. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the original announcement. "The matter will be put to vote," Thanaris announced formally, "all in favor of issuing an ultimatum to Earth." Hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages rose. Throughout the hall, the vote was overwhelming, nearly unanimous. "Earth has 72 standard hours," Thanaris declared. "They must provide a complete explanation for the disappearance of the Draconian 10th Fleet, or face the combined military might of the Galactic Council." As the session ended and delegates began filing out, many wondered the same thing. How could such a primitive world pose any threat to the galaxy's most powerful fleet? The emergency alert pierced through the quiet morning air in the Blue House, Sol's presidential residence. President Lee Dae-ho was enjoying his first cup of coffee when the holographic communication device on his desk began flashing urgent, red warnings. He had only seen this particular device activate twice before, both times for routine diplomatic messages from the Galactic Council about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. This time was different, very different. The hologram materialized above his mahogany desk, displaying alien symbols that twisted and shifted in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Within seconds, Earth's newly installed translation system kicked in, converting the strange script into clear Korean text that made President Lee's blood run cold. "Get everyone to the Situation Room. Now," he barked into his intercom, his voice unusually sharp. 20 minutes later, the underground Situation Room buzzed with nervous energy. The walls were lined with massive screens displaying everything from satellite feeds to deep space monitoring stations. President Lee sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by his most trusted advisors, all of them staring at the translated message that now appeared on the main display. Defense Minister Kim So-young was the first to break the stunned silence. She pushed her glasses up her nose and reread the message for the third time. "Sir, they're claiming that an entire alien fleet disappeared near Earth, 300 ships with 50,000 crew members." She shook her head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Our satellite network covers every inch of space around our planet. Something that massive would light up our sensors like a Christmas tree." General Park Jin-woo, who had been quietly studying the tactical displays, finally looked up from his screens. "Ma'am, with all due respect, they're right about one thing. Our long-range monitoring stations did detect unusual readings 6 days ago. A large group of objects entered our outer solar system, past Pluto's orbit." The room went dead silent. President Lee felt his stomach drop. "And then what happened?" "That's the strange part, sir," General Park continued, his voice growing more uncertain. "The objects appeared on our screens for approximately 4 hours. They were moving in formation, clearly artificial, definitely not asteroids or comets, but then they just disappeared. Our technicians assumed it was a sensor malfunction." Admiral Park Min-ji, Earth's newly appointed liaison to the galactic community, had been frantically scrolling through data on her tablet. She was one of the few humans who had actually interacted with alien species during the initial first contact protocols. "This is a nightmare," she muttered, then looked up at the president. "Sir, the Draconians aren't just any alien species. They're considered one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Their ships are legendary. If they're claiming we somehow made their fleet disappear—" "But we didn't do anything," Defense Minister Kim interrupted, her voice rising with frustration. "Our most advanced weapons are nuclear missiles that would barely scratch the paint on their shuttlecraft. How could we possibly threaten ships that can travel between stars?" President Lee rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "What exactly are they demanding?" Admiral Park read directly from the message. "They want a complete explanation of what happened to their fleet within 72 hours. If we can't provide answers—" She paused, her face going pale. "They're threatening to tear our world apart piece by piece until they find their missing ships." The weight of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Earth had been part of the galactic community for less than 2 years. They were still learning basic protocols, still figuring out how to communicate properly with dozens of different alien species. Now they were being accused of something that seemed physically impossible. "How do we explain something we don't understand ourselves?" President Lee asked, voicing the question that everyone was thinking. General Park pulled up more data on the main screen. "Sir, I've been reviewing all our sensor logs from that time period. The alien ships definitely entered our solar system. They moved past Jupiter, past Mars, and were heading toward Earth's orbital space. Then, between 14:30 and 14:45 hours on March 15th, they simply vanished from our tracking systems." "No explosion signatures?" asked Defense Minister Kim. "Nothing. No energy bursts, no debris fields, no distress signals. It's like they were erased from existence." Admiral Park stood up, her decision already made. "Sir, I need to go to the Galactic Council immediately. I'll represent Earth and try to explain our position." "What position?" President Lee asked helplessly. "That we have no idea what happened." "It's the truth," Admiral Park replied simply. "Sometimes that's all we have." Within 6 hours, Admiral Park found herself aboard Earth's first diplomatic vessel, a hastily converted research ship that looked primitive compared to the sleek alien vessels around the Council space station. As Earth's atmosphere faded behind her, she carried nothing but humanity's confusion, genuine concern and complete ignorance about the fate of 50,000 missing alien warriors. The fate of Earth now rested on her ability to convince an angry galaxy that sometimes the truth is simply, we don't know. The investigation fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a pack of predators hunting for blood. 50 ships from 7 different alien civilizations hung in the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Sol. Each vessel bristled with sensors, scanners, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Commander Rixtar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Alterian vessel Starpiercer. His silver skin reflected the blue glow of the tactical displays as he studied the readings flowing across multiple screens. Behind him, his crew worked in tense silence, their forearms moving quickly across control panels that looked like musical instruments made of light. "Weapon systems are online, Commander," reported his tactical officer. "All ships in the fleet are ready for combat." Rixtar nodded grimly. He had expected to find a battlefield. 300 Draconian warships didn't just disappear without leaving some trace behind. There should be wreckage floating in space, energy signatures from massive explosions, or at least the scattered remains of a devastating battle. "Begin." "Wide-spectrum scanning," he ordered. "I want every piece of space dust analyzed, every energy reading catalogued. The Draconians fought someone or something here, and I want to know what." The investigation began immediately. Sensors swept through the solar system like invisible fingers, probing every asteroid, examining every planet, analyzing every particle of cosmic radiation. The fleet moved slowly inward, past the gas giants Jupiter and Saturn, past the rocky worlds of Mars and Venus, searching for any clue about what had happened to 50,000 missing warriors. Hours passed, then more hours. The results that came back made no sense at all. "Sir?" Officer Kethra called out, her voice filled with confusion. "We're not finding anything. No debris fields, no energy weapon residue, no signs of battle damage anywhere in the system." Commander Rixtar felt his confidence beginning to crack. "Run the scans again, triple-check everything. Use the deep space analyzers." "Already done, sir. This is our 3rd complete sweep of the entire solar system." Kethra's tentacles twitched nervously as she delivered the impossible news. "There's no evidence that the Draconian fleet was ever destroyed here. It's like they just stopped existing." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet humming of the ship's systems. Every member of the crew was thinking the same thing. How do 300 massive warships simply vanish without a trace? "Commander," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human diplomatic vessel. They're requesting permission to join our investigation." Rixtar almost laughed. The human ship looked like a metal box with engines attached, compared to the sleek vessels of the investigation fleet. "Let them approach, but keep our weapons targeted. On them." Admiral Park Minji's voice came through the communication system, speaking in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "Commander Rixtar, this is Earth's diplomatic representative. We want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Our government has ordered complete transparency." When the human ship docked with the Starpiercer, Admiral Park came aboard with a small team of advisors. Rixtar studied the humans carefully as they entered his briefing room. They looked exactly like the primitive species described in the galactic databases. Fragile, short-lived, with basic technology and simple social structures. But something bothered him about their behavior. Admiral Park's biometric readings were completely consistent with genuine confusion and concern. Her heart rate, brain activity, and chemical emissions all indicated that she was telling the truth when she claimed Earth had no knowledge of the fleet's disappearance. Either she was the most skilled liar in galactic history, or the humans really didn't know what had happened. "We've analyzed our own sensor data from the time period in question," Admiral Park said, activating a holographic display. "Our monitoring stations detected the Draconian fleet entering our solar system 6 days ago. They appeared on our screens for several hours, then simply disappeared." "Disappeared how?" Rixtar asked sharply. "We don't know," Admiral Park admitted. "One moment they were there, the next moment they weren't. Our technicians thought it was equipment failure." Rikstar studied the human data, comparing it with his own fleet's sensor readings. The information matched perfectly. The Draconian ships had definitely been in this solar system, and then they had definitely vanished without explanation. "Commander," one of his science officers whispered urgently, "we need to consider the possibility that these humans are far more dangerous than they appear." The thought had already occurred to Rikstar. Throughout galactic history, the most dangerous predators were often the ones that looked harmless. What if humanity's primitive appearance was just a disguise? What if their simple technology was hiding something much more advanced and deadly? As the investigation continued over the following days, more disturbing evidence emerged. The humans cooperated completely, providing access to all their sensor data, opening their facilities for inspection, and answering every question with apparent honesty. Yet the mystery only deepened. 50,000 Draconian warriors had simply vanished into thin air near Earth, and nobody, not even the galaxy's most advanced investigation techniques, could explain how or why. The investigators began to realize they weren't just dealing with missing ships. They were facing something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the laws of physics, the nature of reality, and the true capabilities of the species called humanity. Dr. Zenara had always prided herself on being able to separate myth from reality. As the Galactic Council's most respected xenoarchaeologist, she had spent centuries studying the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. She could spot a fake artifact from across a room and distinguish between genuine historical records and elaborate fairy tales with just a glance. But the ancient texts she was reading in her temporary laboratory aboard the investigation fleet made her question everything she thought she knew about human history. "This can't be right," she muttered to herself, adjusting her multi-lensed reading device for the 100th time. The ancient human manuscript spread before her was written in a dead language called Sanskrit, dating back over 4,000 Earth years. According to human historians, it should contain nothing but primitive religious stories and basic agricultural advice. Instead, it described battles in the sky between gods and demons that sounded remarkably like space warfare. "Listen to this," she called to her research assistant, activating the translation protocol. "The star demons descended from the black void in vessels of burning metal. They challenged the sky gods with weapons that could split mountains and boil oceans. But the gods were mighty, and they cast the demons into the endless darkness between worlds, sealing them in eternal sleep." Her assistant, a young Kelleran named Vextai, looked up from his own research. "Sounds like typical mythology to me, Doctor. Every primitive species has stories about sky gods and cosmic battles. That's what I thought too, until I started analyzing." "The technical details," Dr. Zenara replied, her excitement growing. "Look at these descriptions of the demon vessels. They mention propulsion systems that bend space-time, defensive shields that deflect energy weapons, and navigation systems that can track stellar positions across vast distances. These aren't the fantasies of primitive minds. They're detailed technical specifications." She pulled up more texts on her holographic display. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs spoke of serpent ships that came from distant stars. Mayan codices described feathered serpents who flew between worlds in crystalline craft. Norse sagas told of the Ragnarok, a final battle where the gods would fight sky serpents and drag them into the void. Every single ancient human civilization has similar stories, Dr. Zenara explained, her voice growing more urgent. They all describe the same thing: visitors from space who possessed advanced technology and were somehow defeated or banished. But the real shock came when she began examining Earth's archaeological sites directly. Using the investigation fleet's advanced scanning equipment, she could see through layers of rock and soil that human archaeologists had never been able to penetrate. Deep beneath the pyramids of Egypt, she found metal fragments that shouldn't exist. The alloy composition was identical to materials used in modern Draconian hull plating. Under Stonehenge in England, buried sensors detected the remains of what looked like a crashed spacecraft, its design completely unlike anything in current galactic records. "Commander Rikstar," she called over the communication system. "You need to see this immediately." When the Alterian commander arrived at her lab, Dr. Zenara had prepared the most disturbing evidence yet. "I've been analyzing genetic samples from Earth's current population. Standard procedure, just routine biological cataloging to understand human physiology better." She activated a three-dimensional DNA helix display that rotated slowly in the air between them. "Look at these genetic markers. 97% pure human DNA, which is exactly what we expected to find." "And the other 3%? Commander," Rixtar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. "Trace elements from at least 6 different alien species," Dr. Zenara replied grimly, "including Draconian genetic markers, Alterian cellular patterns, and fragments from species that I can't even identify. It's like humanity is some kind of genetic mixture of multiple galactic civilizations." Admiral Park, who had been monitoring the conversation from Earth's diplomatic vessel, immediately requested an emergency conference. When she appeared via hologram, her face was pale with shock. "Dr. Zenara, I swear to you that this is the first time anyone in Earth's government has heard about any of this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Our own scientists have never detected these genetic anomalies. Our historians have always assumed the ancient texts were mythology. Either your entire scientific community is incompetent," Commander Rixtar said bluntly, "or someone has been deliberately hiding the truth from your people." The implications were staggering. If the ancient texts were accurate historical records, rather than myths, it meant that Earth had been visited by advanced alien civilizations thousands of years ago. More disturbing still, it suggested that these visitors had somehow disappeared or been defeated by forces that no longer existed in the galaxy. Dr. Zenara stared at the genetic analysis results, a terrible possibility forming in her mind. "Commander, what if we're investigating the wrong species entirely? What if humans aren't the primitive creatures we thought they were?" "What are you suggesting?" Rixtar asked. "What if humanity didn't destroy the Draconian fleet?" she whispered. "What if something much older and more dangerous did? Something that's been sleeping on Earth for thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to wake up." The investigation had started as a simple search for missing ships. Now it was becoming something much more frightening, an exploration into humanity's hidden past and the terrifying possibility that Earth's true nature had been concealed from the galaxy for millennia. Council Archivist Morden hadn't slept in 3 days. His tentacles ached from constantly manipulating the holographic data interfaces, and his eyes burned from staring at endless streams of historical records. But Dr. Zenara's discoveries had sent him on a research mission that could change everything. They thought they knew about Earth's sector of space. The massive archives of the Galactic Council contained records dating back over 10,000 years. Every ship movement, every trade route, every exploration mission, every military deployment, it was all documented somewhere in the vast digital libraries that floated in quantum storage banks throughout the galaxy. What Mordoun was finding made his skin crawl. "Commander Rixtar, you need to get down here immediately," he called through the communication system, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I've found something that changes everything." When Commander Rixtar arrived at the archive chamber, he found Morden surrounded by dozens of floating holographic displays, each one showing different time periods and locations. The archivist's normally neat appearance was completely disheveled, his robes wrinkled, and his tentacles moving frantically between data streams. "Look at this pattern," Morden said without preamble, gesturing to a 3-dimensional star map. That showed Earth's solar system at the center. "The Draconian fleet isn't the first to disappear in this region, not even close." He activated the first display, showing events from 847 years ago. "The Kelleran merchant fleet, 12 ships carrying rare minerals from the outer rim. They were taking a shortcut through this sector when they vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage ever found. The official report blamed it on navigational error." Another display lit up, this one showing events from 1,200 years in the past. "The Vashti Exploration Squadron, 6 science vessels investigating anomalous energy readings near Earth's solar system. They sent their last transmission saying they were approaching the third planet from the local star. Then, nothing. The Council assumed they were destroyed by pirates. Morden's tentacles moved faster now, activating display after display. Each one showed the same story: ships entering Earth's sector of space and simply disappearing. The lost colony ship Xerion vanished 1,200 years ago with 15,000 colonists aboard. The Dracari war fleet that went missing during their expansion campaign 3,400 years past. The Zephyrian Trading Consortium, the Mordak Raiders, the Celestial Wanderer exploration vessel, all gone without a trace. Commander Rixtar felt his blood growing cold as he watched the pattern emerge. How many ships are we talking about? Over the last 5,000 years? Nearly 200 vessels of various sizes, from single-pilot scouts to entire battle fleets, all last detected in or near Earth's solar system. Morden paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. But here's the truly disturbing part. Look at what type of ships disappeared. He highlighted specific entries on the displays. Every single vessel that vanished was either military, carrying weapons, or approaching Earth with hostile intentions. The Kelleran merchants were smuggling illegal weapons. The Vashti were conducting unauthorized surveillance. The Dracari were planning to conquer and colonize the system. What about peaceful visitors? Rixtar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Morden activated another set of displays. That's just it. Peaceful traders, scientific expeditions, and diplomatic missions have been passing through Earth's system for millennia without any problems. Look at these records. The Benthic Cultural Exchange Mission, the Alterian Botanical Survey, the Xerion Peaceful Contact Attempt, all successful, all returned safely. The implications hit Commander Rixtar like a physical blow. You're saying something in that system can tell the difference between peaceful and hostile intentions? It gets worse, Morden continued, his voice shaking. I cross-referenced the disappearances with galactic military records. Every major aggressive species that tried to expand into Earth's sector eventually stopped their expansion entirely. The Dracari Empire suddenly shifted their attention to the opposite side of the galaxy. The Mordak Raiders abandoned their entire expansion campaign. The Zephyrian hegemony changed from a militant civilization to a peaceful trading society practically overnight. Commander Rixtar stared at the data, his mind racing, as if something was systematically removing aggressive threats from the galaxy. Or protecting Earth from them, Morden added quietly. But there's one more thing that doesn't make sense. I've been analyzing the timing of these disappearances, looking for patterns in when they occur. He activated a final display showing a timeline stretching back thousands of years. The disappearances don't happen randomly. They cluster around specific time periods, usually when Earth's human population is going through major conflicts or disasters. Wars, plagues, natural catastrophes. It's like whatever is protecting them becomes more active when humans are in danger. The archive chamber fell silent, except for the quiet humming of the data processors. Both beings stared at the overwhelming evidence spread before them, trying to comprehend what it meant. So what are we dealing with? Commander Rixtar finally asked. Some kind of ancient guardian system? A forgotten weapon left behind by a vanished civilization? I don't know, Morden admitted. But whatever it is, it's been operating for thousands of years, systematically removing threats to Earth while allowing peaceful contact to continue. The humans might not even know it exists. Or, Commander Rixtar said grimly, they know exactly what it is, and they've been lying to the galaxy for millennia. The investigation had uncovered a pattern that stretched back through galactic history, a hidden force that had been shaping the development of entire civilizations, protecting one small blue planet from every threat that dared to approach it, with hostile intent. The question now was whether this force was humanity's greatest secret weapon, or something even more dangerous that had been using Earth as bait for thousands of years. Admiral Park Minji stared out the viewport of her ship's secure conference room, watching the distant blue marble of Earth slowly rotating in the darkness of space. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, knowing that the words she was about to speak would change everything, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Commander Rixtar and Dr. Zen Ara sat across from her, along with Council Archivist Morden, who had insisted on being present for this meeting. The weight of their accumulated evidence hung heavy in the air, like a storm about to break. There was no more hiding, no more pretending, no more maintaining the carefully constructed lie that had protected humanity for thousands of years. "What I'm about to tell you," Admiral Park began, her voice barely above a whisper, "is known by fewer than a dozen people on Earth. Our own governments don't know the full truth. Our scientists, our historians, our leaders, they've all been living a carefully maintained fiction." She activated the holographic display system, and the small conference room suddenly filled with images that made the investigation team gasp, in shock. Star charts showing vast battle formations stretching across entire solar systems, technical specifications for weapons that could crack planets like eggs, military records detailing the systematic conquest of hundreds of worlds. "Earth isn't humanity's homeworld," Admiral Park said, each word falling like a hammer blow. "It's our prison." The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Rikstar's silver skin had turned almost white, while Dr. Zenara's multiple eyes widened in disbelief. Morden's tentacles had gone completely still, something that only happened when his species experienced extreme shock. 12,000 years ago, humans were the most feared species in the galaxy. Admiral Park continued, her voice growing stronger as she finally shared the burden she had carried alone for so long. "We didn't explore space. We conquered it. We didn't seek peaceful contact with other civilizations. We enslaved them or destroyed them entirely." The holographic displays shifted, showing images of human warriors who looked nothing like the peaceful inhabitants of modern Earth. These ancient humans wore armor that seemed to bend light around them, carried weapons that pulsed with energy, and their eyes glowed with an inner fire that spoke of power beyond imagination. "We could manipulate space-time itself," Admiral Park explained. "Humans could step between dimensions like walking through doorways. We could bend reality to our will, make matter obey our thoughts, turn stars into weapons. We weren't just another species with advanced technology. We were something else entirely." Commander Rikstar found his voice, though it came out as barely a croak. "The primitive humans we observe today are the descendants of the most dangerous military force the galaxy has ever known." "Yes," Admiral Park finished for him, "but our power came with a price. The more we used our abilities, the more aggressive and violent we became. War wasn't just what we did, it was what we were. We consumed civilizations like a plague spreading across the stars." She activated another series of displays, showing the final war that had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. Entire star systems reduced to rubble, billions of beings fleeing their homeworlds as human forces swept across space like an unstoppable tide of destruction. "Finally, the surviving species of the galaxy united against us," Admiral Park said. "Not to destroy us. They had tried that and failed. Instead, they did something far more clever. They built a prison that would contain not just our bodies, but our very nature." The holographic display showed Earth as it had been transformed, ringed with energy barriers invisible to the human eye, surrounded by quantum locks that prevented any human from leaving, and most importantly, filled with technology designed to suppress the genetic memories and psychic abilities that made humans so dangerous. "They wiped our memories," Admiral Park continued, "suppressed our abilities, made us forget who we really were. Then they sat back and watched as we became the primitive species you see today, violent enough to fight among ourselves, but not powerful enough to threaten the galaxy." Dr. Zenara spoke for the first time since the revelation began. "The ancient texts, the genetic markers, the archaeological evidence, it's all real. Every word of it," Admiral Park confirmed. "The mythological stories are racial memories, bleeding through the suppression technology. The genetic markers are remnants of the species we conquered and absorbed. The buried artifacts are the remains of our own technology, slowly degrading over millennia." "But the Draconian fleet," Commander Rikstar said urgently. "What happened to them?" Admiral Park's expression grew grim. "They triggered our ancient defenses. The prison wasn't just designed to keep humans in, it was designed to keep threats out. When the Draconians approached Earth with hostile intent, the automated defense systems activated. The same systems that have been making aggressive fleets disappear for thousands of years. Where are they now? Mordoun asked. Somewhere between dimensions, Admiral Park replied. Trapped in a space that exists parallel to our reality. Alive, but unreachable. The prison's defense mechanisms don't kill, they isolate. Every hostile force that has ever threatened Earth is still out there, fighting the same battles over and over in a reality that moves at a different speed than ours, the E. Conference room fell silent again as the investigation team processed the magnitude of what they had learned. Humanity wasn't a primitive species that had somehow defeated an advanced fleet. They were the descendants of the galaxy's greatest nightmare, locked away and forgotten until someone foolish enough to approach their world with weapons drawn. The question now, Admiral Park said quietly, is what you're going to do with this knowledge, because the prison that holds us is starting to weaken, and our people are beginning to remember who they really are. The first report came from a panicked teacher in Seoul at exactly 2:47 p.m. local time. Mrs. Choi had been teaching her third-grade class about planets when 8-year-old Minho suddenly stood up, pointed at the solar system model hanging from the ceiling, and made it spin without touching it. Not just a gentle rotation, the model spun so fast it created a small whirlwind that scattered papers across the classroom. He wasn't even trying, Mrs. Choi reported to the school principal, her voice shaking. Minho just looked annoyed that the model wasn't moving, and suddenly it started spinning like a tornado. When I asked him how he did it, he just shrugged and said it was easy. By 4 p.m. that same day, similar reports were flooding in from across South Korea. A teenager named Nara in Busan had somehow made herself completely invisible during gym class, reappearing 20 minutes later with no memory of where she had gone. In Daegu, a group of elementary school children had been found playing in what their teacher swore was an empty classroom, but security cameras showed the room was definitely occupied by something the cameras couldn't detect. The South Korean. Government initially dismissed these reports as mass hysteria or elaborate pranks. That changed when President Lee Dae-ho's own grandson demonstrated the ability to walk through solid walls during a family dinner at the Blue House. "Grandpa, watch this," 7-year-old Lee Jun said cheerfully, then stepped directly through the dining room wall as if it didn't exist. He emerged from the kitchen 30 seconds later, carrying a cookie and completely unaware that he had just violated several fundamental laws of physics. President Lee immediately activated the emergency protocols that Admiral Park had established before leaving for the Galactic Council. Within hours, reports were coming in from around the globe. Children in Japan were levitating objects. Teenagers in Australia were accidentally teleporting short distances. In rural villages across Asia, kids were stepping between what they called shadow spaces, parallel dimensions that existed alongside normal reality. Dr. Zen-Ara, monitoring Earth from her position with the investigation fleet, watched the readings on her instruments with growing horror. The energy signatures emanating from Earth's population were unlike anything in her databases. Children who should have been playing with toys were generating power levels that registered on deep space sensors. "Commander Rikstar," she called, urgently. "The quantum barriers around Earth are destabilizing. Whatever technology was used to suppress human abilities is failing." "How long do we have?" the commander asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Based on the rate of deterioration, weeks, maybe less." But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. Deep space scanners had detected something that shouldn't exist, energy signatures matching the missing Draconian fleet, but not in normal space. The readings were coming from what appeared to be a parallel dimension running alongside reality. "They're still alive," Dr. Zen-Ara reported in amazement. "The entire Draconian fleet is trapped in some kind of dimensional pocket." But the temporal readings are strange. It appears they've only experienced a few hours, while several days have passed in our reality. Admiral Park received the reports from Earth's various governments with a mixture of relief and terror. Relief, because the awakening abilities were manifesting in children who were naturally more adaptable and less likely to use their powers destructively. Terror, because she knew this was just the beginning. "The children don't understand what they're doing," she reported to the Galactic Council during an emergency session. "To them, it's just playing. a 6-year-old girl in Tokyo made her entire apartment building briefly exist in 2 places at once because she wanted her friend from across town to come play. A boy in Mumbai accidentally created a small black hole in his bedroom because he was angry about being sent to bed early. The council chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives from dozens of species called for immediate military action, demanding that Earth be sterilized before the humans regained their full power. "You don't understand," Admiral Park said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These children have never heard of the ancient war. They don't know about our violent history. They're accessing powers that once terrorized the galaxy, but they're using them for innocent games and childhood frustrations, which makes them even more dangerous," Ambassador Veltar snarled. "Uncontrolled power in the hands of emotional children? They could accidentally destroy star systems?" "But they could also be different," Admiral Park replied firmly. "The humans who fought the ancient war were adults shaped by violence and conquest. These children are growing up in a peaceful world, learning compassion and cooperation. If we attack them now, we'll prove that the galaxy hasn't changed, and we'll force them to become what we fear most." She activated a holographic display showing energy readings from Earth. "Look at how they're using their abilities, not for conquest or destruction, but for connection, play, and exploration. Yes, there have been accidents, but no deliberate violence. These children represent something new, humans with the power of their ancestors but without the corruption." "And if you're wrong?" Commander Rixtar asked quietly. Admiral Park met his gaze steadily. "If you attack Earth now, you'll shatter the final barriers that contain us. The awakening will accelerate, and instead of playful children discovering their abilities gradually, you'll have desperate adults accessing powers they don't understand in a fight for survival." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. 12,000 years ago, it took the combined might of the entire galaxy to imprison us. This time, there might not be enough species left to try again. The fate of both humanity and the galaxy now hung in the balance, decided by the innocence of children who could reshape reality with a thought, and the wisdom of leaders who had to choose between fear and hope. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such tension. For 3 straight days, representatives from across the galaxy had argued, shouted, and pleaded as they faced the most important decision in their collective history. The ancient crystalline walls seemed to vibrate with the intensity of emotions, filling the vast space. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center of the debate, his dragon-like scales reflecting the harsh lights as he made his final argument. "We have one chance, one single opportunity to prevent the return of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. The humans are still weak, still mostly contained. We can end this threat forever before they regain their full power." His words carried the weight of fear that had been building among the council members for days. Reports from Earth showed human children performing impossible feats with casual ease. A 10-year-old girl in Singapore had accidentally opened a portal to another galaxy while trying to show her grandmother the pretty stars. A boy in Cairo had briefly stopped time in his entire neighborhood because he wanted more time to finish his homework. "You speak of ending a threat," Speaker Thaneris replied from the central podium, her multiple arms gesturing toward historical displays. "But what if we create an even greater one? The ancient records are clear. When humans were cornered and desperate, their power grew exponentially. Attack them now and we might face beings who can collapse entire star systems with their thoughts." The chamber erupted in voices as delegates argued among themselves. Some species called for complete annihilation, others urged caution, and a few brave voices suggested something that seemed impossible: cooperation. Commander Rixtar had spent the last week compiling his final report, and now he stood to present evidence that could change everything. "I've studied the awakening phenomena for days," he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Yes, human children are accessing incredible powers, but look at how they're using them." He activated holographic displays showing scenes from across Earth. Children using telekinesis to help their elderly neighbors carry groceries. Teenagers accidentally healing injured animals with touches that somehow mended broken bones. A group of kids in Brazil who had collectively created a small rainstorm to water their school garden during a drought. "These aren't the actions of a warlike species," Commander Rixtar continued. "These children have never known conquest or domination. They're using abilities that once terrorized the galaxy for kindness, curiosity, and play. Yes, there have been accidents, but I've found no evidence of deliberate aggression. Ambassador Veltar's voice dripped with skepticism. Children grow up. Their innocence won't last forever. What happens when they face real conflict, real anger, real hatred? Then we guide them, came an unexpected voice from the human section. Admiral Park had been granted permission to address the Council directly. On Earth, we're not pretending this isn't happening. We're adapting. She shared reports from Earth's governments, showing how quickly human society was changing to accommodate the new reality. Schools were being transformed into training centers where children learned to control their abilities alongside traditional subjects. Teachers were working with psychologists and the few humans who had maintained some knowledge of the ancient powers to develop new educational approaches. In Seoul, 8-year-old Minho now helps his teacher rearrange the classroom. Furniture every morning using telekinesis, Admiral Park reported. But he also learns about responsibility, consequences, and the importance of asking permission before using his abilities. In Tokyo, teenager Hana can step between dimensions, but she uses that power to find lost pets and help search and rescue teams locate missing people. The debate continued for hours more, with species threatening to withdraw from the Council if their positions weren't adopted. Some delegates walked out entirely, declaring they would take unilateral action regardless of the Council's decision. Finally, Speaker Thainris called for the vote that would determine the fate of both humanity and the galaxy. All those in favor of immediate military action against Earth, she announced. Hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages rose throughout the chamber. The count was close, closer than anyone had expected. All those in favor of attempted coexistence with oversight and monitoring. More appendages rose, but the difference was agonizingly small. Speaker Thainris herself had not yet voted, and her decision would determine the outcome. The chamber fell completely silent as she considered her choice. Finally, she raised one of her 4 arms. The motion for coexistence passes by a single vote, she announced, her voice echoing through the stunned chamber. We choose to trust in the possibility of change, but with careful observation and immediate intervention protocols if the situation deteriorates. The decision sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Some species immediately began preparing defensive measures, convinced that the Council had just signed the death warrant for galactic civilization. Others cautiously began planning for a future where humanity might once again walk among the stars on Earth. President Lee received the news with a mixture of relief and terror. Humanity had been granted a chance to prove they had truly changed, but the entire galaxy would be watching their every move. We have to get this right, he told his advisors. Not just for us, but for every living being in the galaxy. Our children's. Games today will determine whether we're remembered as a species that learned from its past, or one that repeated its darkest mistakes. The choice had been made. Now came the much harder task of proving that it was the right one. The reality tear appeared without warning in the space near Earth's moon, crackling with energies that made every sensor on the investigation fleet scream alerts. Commander Rixtar watched in amazement as the fabric of space-time itself began to unfold like a flower, blooming in reverse, revealing something that shouldn't exist. The Draconian fleet materialized ship by ship, emerging from what looked like a shimmering mirror made of starlight. 300 vessels that had been missing for weeks suddenly appeared as if they had never left, their hulls gleaming and their weapons powered down. But something was different about them. The ships moved with a strange, almost hesitant quality, as if their crews were seeing the universe for the first time. On the bridge of the flagship Death's Honor, Commander Veltar blinked in confusion as normal space solidified around his vessel. To him and his crew, they had been fighting the same impossible battle for what felt like mere hours. Enemy ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that bent the laws of physics, and defenders who fought with a restraint that defied all military logic. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving communication requests from multiple sources. The investigation fleet, the Galactic Council, and Ambassador Veltar. Commander Veltar's blood went cold. If his own ambassador was here, how long had they been gone? The reunion between the two Draconians was broadcast across the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar, who had aged weeks while fighting for answers about his missing fleet, stared in shock at Commander Veltar, who had aged only days, despite experiencing what felt like endless combat. "Report," the ambassador demanded, though his voice carried more relief than authority. Commander Veltar struggled to find words for what he had experienced. "We were trapped in some kind of parallel space, fighting defenders who could have obliterated us at any moment but chose not to. Every time we pressed an attack, they responded with exactly enough force to stop us, never more. When we retreated, they let us go. When we regrouped, they waited." His voice grew quieter, filled with something that sounded almost like respect. "Ambassador, they fought with honor. Perfect honor. They could have destroyed us with a thought, but they chose containment instead. Even when we fired on their positions, even when we called them monsters and demons, they treated us as worthy opponents rather than enemies to be exterminated." The implications of this report rippled through the galactic community like shockwaves. The humans hadn't simply made the Draconian fleet disappear. They had carefully preserved them, keeping them safe in a pocket dimension while the galaxy decided their fate. 2 months later, the Galactic Council chamber had been reconfigured to accommodate its newest member. Admiral Park Minji stood at the podium designated for Earth's representative, wearing the ceremonial robes of a provisional council member. The sight of a human in the ancient chamber sent murmurs through the assembled delegates, some fearful, others curious, all watchful. "Earth accepts provisional membership in the Galactic Council," Admiral Park announced formally. "With full understanding of the oversight and monitoring protocols, we commit to transparency in all our actions and peaceful resolution of any conflicts that may arise." Behind her, holographic displays showed images from across Earth. The transformation of human society was happening faster than anyone had expected, but in ways that gave hope to even the most skeptical observers. Former elementary schools had become ability academies, where children learned to control powers that defied imagination, alongside traditional subjects like mathematics and literature. In Seoul, the Kim Academy for Gifted Children had become a model for the world. 8-year-old Minho, who had first manifested telekinetic abilities, now served as a peer mentor for younger children. Under careful guidance, he had learned to use his powers to help with classroom activities, moving supplies and equipment with precision that amazed his teachers. "The most remarkable thing," reported Dr. Chen Ling, the Academy's head psychologist, "is how naturally the children accept responsibility for their abilities. They understand that with great power comes the need for great care. They're teaching each other control, patience and compassion. But the real test came when Earth launched its first diplomatic mission to other worlds. The ship New Harmony was a marvel of combined human intuition and galactic technology. Its crew included both humans with awakened abilities and aliens who served as cultural liaisons and safety monitors. Captain Park Jun-ho, Admiral Park's younger brother, commanded the vessel with a crew that could literally reshape reality if they chose to. Instead, they used their mission to deliver medical supplies to a plague-stricken colony in the Vega system, demonstrating healing abilities that saved thousands of lives. They could have demanded tribute, established dominance, or simply taken what they wanted, reported the colony's governor. Instead, they asked how they could help and worked alongside our medical teams as equals. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, Archivist Mordoon made one final discovery that put everything into perspective. Working through layers of ancient encryption, he finally decoded a message that had been hidden in the Council's foundational documents for over 10,000 years. The holographic text appeared in the ancient language of the first civilization, the mysterious species that had established the Council before vanishing into history. The translation made Mordoon's tentacles tremble as he read it aloud. "We have seen the rise and fall of countless species across the stars. Some choose the path of conquest, others the way of peace. But rarely do we witness a people who walk both paths and learn to choose differently. Beware the day when humanity remembers who they truly are, for their power can reshape worlds. But hope for the day when they choose to be better than their past, for then They will reshape the galaxy itself, not through force but through the strength of wisdom earned through suffering. Across the galaxy, species watched nervously but hopefully as human ships began their careful journeys to the stars. Children who could bend reality with their thoughts were growing up learning that true strength came from knowing when not to use power, that real victory meant everyone going home safely, and that the greatest conquest was conquering oneself. The ancient warning had come true. Humanity had remembered who they were, but they had also chosen to become something their ancestors never imagined, a species that had touched the darkness of absolute power and deliberately stepped back into the light. The galaxy would never be the same, but for the first time in millennia, that change carried the promise of hope rather than the threat of destruction. The children of Earth had found their way home to the stars, not as conquerors returning to reclaim their empire, but as neighbors ready to build something better together.